my main argument is that there is a misunderstanding as to the reason why they matter, because traditionally one think about institution as means, as instruments to bring about certain results. So when we speak about judicial review or the power of the court, when we speak about the Soho decision in Argentina, then we say, okay, why do we need courts to review statutes? We need courts to review statutes because they make better decisions. And my main argument that that's not the only argument, that there are intrinsic reasons, there are intrinsic values that justify it. For instance, in the case of judicial review, which is one of the main subjects in the book, I argue that what judicial review gives us is the ability to be heard. Namely, if I make a claim, if I meet you and say, let's have lunch, and later on I call you and I say, sorry, I can't have lunch, and you say, but you promised, then even if I have good reasons, I ought to provide you the opportunity to challenge my decision, to ask me questions about it, to reconsider it. The way I regard judicial review is as a means of reconsideration, of reconsidering my power as a citizen to say to the state, you may be right, but I want you to think about it again. I want to argue my case and so on. So this has nothing to do with the quality of the resulting decisions. It has to do with the process of me, small kind of insignificant citizen, coming to the state and say, give me an explanation, reconsider your decision, think about it again. The argument is, I mean, if it makes horrible decisions, then it could be the case that this value is being overridden. But let's say the institution make roughly the same quality of decision, legislature. Or let's say even the judiciary makes slightly worse decisions. Even in this case, I would say that the ability of citizens to stand and make their case in front of the state is valuable independently of the quality of the independent of the quality of the decision. Yeah, what I regard as essential is not that there will be judges or courts the way, but what I regard as essential is that there will be an adjudicative process. And actually from the history of Argentina, we learned that the weakness was of the courts and other adjudicative institutions had to do not with the constitution itself, which granted them power, but with practices and with the fact that they didn't, the nice words in the constitution are simply ignored. But that's what I learned now about Argentina. But the important thing for me is the adjudicative process. The adjudicative process typically has three stages. One is I don't know, citizen or a resident in Argentina, I come and say, you violated my right. You violated my right to over my body in the case of abortion. I know there wasn't the case, but it's a lively issue here. You violated my right because you don't allow me to have a normal, or because whatever. And then it triggers a duty on the part of the state to answer. Not only to hear, but to answer. To say, this and this is the argument and so on. But the most important thing is not only to answer in this formal way, but to reconsider, to ask, to actually deliberate again. This is the issue. I, the citizen, can trigger not only a formal answer from the state, but I can trigger a reconsideration of the case. I can require the state to think about it again. And the courts are merely one institution that can make it. It's not the only institution that can make it. Theoretically, even the legislature can make it. Even practically, it's unlikely. But theoretically, it's every institution can. When you have people who hear the case, provide an opportunity for the person to raise their arguments, try to answer it, and thinks again, deliberates again. Ask myself not only what the best political theory is, but also How do ordinary people think about institutions? How do ordinary people think about procedures? And I came to the conclusion that this kind of highly abstract, consequentialist kind of decision-oriented ideal is totally bogus for many reasons. First of all, people don't think about it. People fight for the Constitution, not because it is likely to make better decisions in the future. That's not the reason. They care about it deeply for other reasons. And I wanted my theory to be faithful, not only in the sense that it yields the right decision, but also in the sense that it traces why citizens want these institutions. Not only why these institutions are good, but why citizens want these institutions. So I wanted this to in a way, to reflect or replicate best possible way to replicate the way we think about constitution, we think about institutions. I don't think we think about them as merely instruments. I think we are tied up, they represent something. For instance, the legislature. The legislature represents in our psyche, at least in the Western world, the legislature represents what we want. Judges and courts represent reason. And this representation, of course, to some extent not true, and in reality it's all messed up, but I think it's important that the political theory will be sensitive to these images of these institutions. And therefore that my theory will trace not only which institution we ought to have, but also why we think, why we citizens, not sophisticated professors, not kind of abstract jurists sitting at the university with two legs on the table, as I tend to do, and thinking about it. But what the person on the street thinks about these institutions. I think people are attached to these institutions for reasons that have nothing to do with their instrumental value.